Today we're talking about well-being politics. And I first heard this term when I was reading The Great Reset by Schwab. And either way, depending on what side of the fence you're on, you're raising an eyebrow for one reason or another. So either you're a fan or you are absolutely aghast that I read the book. But because it was so polarizing, and I was very curious. So I decided I wanted to read for myself. And sure enough, I'm glad I did, because a lot of what was said online was, stuff taken out of context and misquotes and things like that. So I'm glad that I read it for myself. And there were some parts of the book that, made me raise an eyebrow for sure. And some parts of the book that I very much disagreed with. But then there were some parts of the book that I rather enjoyed and agreed with and hope they're right. And one of the things that was mentioned in that regard was well-being politics. I really liked that section of the book. So basically what he was saying in the book was that we've become so polarized, it's become toxic, and families are splitting up over political disagreements, and it's just become awful, us versus them. And even when good policies are brought forth, things don't happen because other parties are undermining them, because you can't let your opposing party get away with doing a good thing or get credit for a good thing. So it's just become this big mud show. And politicians are only looking, the next 4 years. They only ever think of the next election. And that's problematic, right? So, because now nothing gets done on the long term and decisions aren't made on the long term. So nobody's happy right now. And we know that this is true because of low voter turnout, which frankly, as a strategist, we like low voter turnout. And, that's a whole other, let's talk about that in another class. I don't want to digress. So, it results in low voter turnout because people are they're cynical and they're exhausted. They're just exhausted. And they don't believe anything anymore because it's just this, show. Everybody's this feigned outrage every single day, and everything's always exaggerated and whatever. And you just roll your eyes, and I'm done with it. And so, if we want that to change, what the Great Reset is saying is that people want to vote for someone who is for something, not just against something. And that people are desperate to be inspired. And we know that that is true because of the rise of populism. That's how a guy like Trump, or a guy like Obama for that matter, can create a movement. And also the very reason someone like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden the next round may not make it, because they don't have that same charisma that Obama had, or on the opposite flag, Trump. So, people want someone who's going to make them feel like they're going to fight the good fight, and they're going to make the difference, and they're going to change. And if you can bring on that energy, you have a really good chance of winning. So in the last federal election, because we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I had just, read The Great Reset, and I thought, I'm going to put it to the test on this campaign. And so there were some posts or messaging that I was, trying to steer the campaign around, that very much coincided with the Great Reset's well-being agenda, right? Where it's like, try and inspire them. Let's not just sit there and complain and criticize or whatever. Let's talk about what matters to this candidate and what inspires him and how he can relate, to people. And he happened to have a father in long-term care during the pandemic, and that wasn't good, and wasn't able to see him for a really long time. So, and got to see him one day, and then his dad died the next day. So it was a very tragic situation. And now he's the caregiver to his elderly mother who lives on her own. So there's a lot of pressure that this guy can relate to. And he's an owner of a small business. So that's also a lot of pressure. He can relate to a lot of people. Half the country is employed by small businesses. This is a relatable guy, right? So, we went with that messaging. We talked about what he knows as a business owner and how he's impacted by different policies. And we talked about, what he can relate to in terms of families that were separated by the pandemic and long-term care, and, what could be done for long-term care. And and then all the noise of, criticisms and catty politics and mudslinging. We didn't engage in that, and other candidates did, like the other sides did towards his campaign, and he looked like the bigger person, and he got a lot of respect for that. And he's a guy that we often hear throughout the campaign trail. I would never vote for your party, but I'm going to vote for you. And considering in an older class, when we talked about the running as an independent, and I said to you, what is it, 90%, 90% of a campaign has nothing to do with the candidate. The candidate is a very small blip on the radar. And yet, knowing that if you can turn people that would never vote for your party to vote for you, now that's like a real win. That's a huge win. And inspiring people and being a bit more positive on the campaign trail is a really great way to do that. And it doesn't have to be fake. We all have lived experience. All of us have lived experience. But instead of getting on, the platform of the public campaign to say, the other party sucks at this because of this, and you turn it into, I remember one time my family went through this. Who was really good at this is actually Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh had a very interesting life history. There was a lot of struggle there. And he really was someone who didn't fall through the cracks. And a lot of that was due to his own willpower. And really uncommon situation that resulted in an uncommon success. So that's a pretty great success story. And so a lot of his campaign last election was around that messaging and how he really understands families that struggle with abuse, with addiction, with, split up, like broken homes. He raised his little brother. Like there was a lot going on there, and he was very vulnerable in sharing that with the public, and that made him relatable. That inspired well-being. He would go on TikTok, which not many other politicians were doing the TikTok thing, and he owned TikTok. And, he's going after the youth vote. He's trying to inspire youth because the youth naturally usually tend to the left, right? Bless them. There's beautiful hearts, right? A young kid just wants everybody to do well and everybody to be okay. And, the fiscal realities they don't understand because they're still living for free at home. So they don't know what it's like. So it's easy to go left when you're a kid, but he counts on that. So he goes where the kids are, and that's on TikTok. And his videos were very fun. They were positive. He wasn't out pontificating, and that's a really good way to go. Now, if you want to look at the opposite of that, you can look at the liberal playbook. So, for example, even though conservatives for years and years and years have said we're not legislating abortion, every election they talk about the abortion boogeyman, right? Every election they try. I remember there was one time they always say, oh, conservatives are racist. That's like the usual, that's another accusation they like to throw away freely. And yet at the time, there were more people of color running on that election bill than the Liberal campaign. And yet they were using that messaging, right? So people are tired of the toxicity, What they want is more what Jagmeet Singh did. They want that positivity. Do you know who was famous for this? Wellbeing Politics was Jack Layton's playbook. Wellbeing Politics didn't get invented by the Great Reset. There are some politicians that have been trying to do this their entire professional career. And Jack Layton of the NDP, another NDPer, so let's give the thumbs up to the NDP on this one. Jack Layton in Toronto was a fantastic well-being politics guy. And he was very positive up until the moment he died, and he even used his dying moment, his last words to the public, to try and create a sense of unity and bipartisan respect. And he was a special person for sure. And people want more of that, especially after a pandemic. Are you kidding? Especially after a pandemic, the society was so divided. We were afraid of each other. Like, that was a real awful time. And everybody's still a little frazzled by it, right? So right now, what we need more than anything is being inspired. So if you can make that happen, then now we're following a positive trend. So imagine now if this did become the trend. Because here's what happens. When one person slings mud, it's easy for you to sling mud, right? And when one person starts doing the well-being thing, now they start to look like a saint. So the opposing guy is going to say, well, I can't make them look good, because now if I start being a jerk, now I look like a jerk because they're being, polite or whatever. So that forces the other guy to behave, which is fantastic, because it's a lot easier than mudslinging. So it's not only easier on your candidate, it's easier on your comms team, it's easier on party headquarters, because there's less drama, there's less, disasters and scandals, so you're spending less money. So it's fantastic when everybody's just, you talk about your policy, I talk about my policy, and let the voter decide which platform resonates better with them. And it not be about personal attacks, or if you vote for this party, that means you're dumb. If you vote for this party, that means you're evil. That's the stuff that we don't want that anymore. It used to break my heart that families were dividing over politics, for example, and, I leaned to the right. I had a friend of mine that was very left. She was a strategist too. And we razzed each other online and then would go for drinks at the end of the day, right? And then meanwhile, families are dividing it. If this is our job, this is our life, and we can remain friends, what is everybody's problem? Not talking to Uncle Sam because Uncle Sam didn't vote your way? Like, man, so we need to change the tide of that. And that has to happen as a collective, and it'll start, you'll see, it'll start to permeate society, where you're going to get a few, especially now because the division's been called out. So now that we have another federal election looming, in the next year and a half, we're already hearing about people being tired of the division. So now everybody coming forward is going to try and inspire unity. But that's a great thing. It's a great thing. And well-being politics is a good trend. So am I telling you that you shouldn't get, opposition, someone looking out at your opposition to see what they're up to? Of course you should. Of course you should, because if they're going to play dirty, you can't, just sit there and take all the arrows. Like, you're going to have to do something. So of course you want to know everything about your opposition. Of course you're going to want to watch for missteps. Of course you're going to want to make sure they're not doing anything they're not supposed to be doing. So all of that still, remains true. And you can try and be saintly in your campaigning, but there may come a time where you have to throw down. The gloves come off, and you have to be ready for that too. However, you can wait for them to do that and see where you can rise above always, and avoid that kind of thing whenever possible. Because sometimes I feel like running a negative campaign is the lazy way to do it. And these days it's why people don't go vote. And what you need to do to win is get people to go vote. So if you're just wah, 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 complaining the whole time, that doesn't really make you want to get up off the chair. But if you're someone that has a lot of good things to say, and I feel like you actually care, and maybe this time it'll be different, damn it, maybe that person's just going to go vote that day. But you have to make them want to go, because voting, we've become a very lazy society, and voting is annoying. Standing in line is annoying. And we've become to the point that we don't do annoying things anymore. That's why we can't find anybody to work, right? We've become very zero tolerance. So you need to be inspiring in order to win. And looking at well-being, it's good for the public, it's good for your campaign, it's good for your campaign members, it's good for you, it's good for the party. So I highly suggest you try and do the well-being thing as much as possible.